Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 21, verse 26. Very, 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 very famous pasuk. Vayomer Elokim, and God said, Naaseh Adam b'tzalmenu kitmusenu. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. And they will, and humanity will reign over the fish and the birds and the animals, etc. And then in verse 27, God created man. So the famous thing in this pasuk is the usage of the word naaseh, let us make man. And this is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Rashi. Rashi says that God sort of consulted with his angels, and this is to teach us derech eretz, that we don't normally act unilaterally. We discuss things with people. That's what Rashi says. But I'd like to focus on another point in the pasuk. What did this pasuk teach us exactly? Most specifically, the first part of the pasuk. God said, "Let us make man." So this is like a planning pasuk. And then the next pasuk says, "Yeah, God made man." So what do we need the introductory pasuk for "Let us make man"? And whatever details God describes about what will be for humanity could easily be tucked into the following pasukim. Just for example, just to give you a sense, in verse 27, it says God created man in his image, right? So that was one of the big things. Oh, it's going to be in our likeness and our image. You could have said that phrase in the next pasuk. So why do we need an introductory pasuk? Okay, we're going to make man. What's that all about? Ramban on pasuk Chava, Vayomer Elokim Naaseh Adam. Nisyached ba'asiyas ha'adam ma'amar ba'avur godel ma'alaso. There's this introductory pasuk because of the greatness of humanity. Kien tivo kiteva chayva behema asher bar b'ma'amar hakodem lo. This is not just next life form to be created. Humanity is a whole different world of creation. Of course, we would say that God's creating of humanity is the purpose of creation. So Hashem wants to make it clear that we're not just another creature on the earth, and we have a unique role in this world. All of humanity, not just the Jewish people, all of humanity have a unique role in this world. And that's conveyed by an introductory pasuk about the concept of the creation of man. It's a whole different ballgame. Lishvotz nefesh chai v'yamamar b'hem yishvotzu hamayim v'yamamar b'hem b'totzei haaretz amar b'adam naaseh klomar aniv haaretz haniskeres naaseh adam. The Ramban now addresses the issue about why it says let us make man, and this fits in with a famous idea of the Ramban which we did not discuss yesterday. It's a short week, as I'm sure you all realize, but hope people have their Shabbos grocery list already. But the bottom line is the Ramban's position is that everything that God created after the initial creation of the world is yesh miyesh, creating something from something that was already in existence. The famous Ramban. The Ramban basically says that the matter for everything in the world was created at the beginning. And so, for example, we read in the Psukim about the water bringing forth the fish and the earth bringing forth different creations. That's what it means, that God instilled the matter for all these aspects of the world at the beginning. So Ramban says that's what it means, Naaseh Adam, that God, in conjunction with the earth, is going to make man together. In other words, and this is the famous idea that human beings, and this is so unique to us, versus animals and the other creatures, human beings are this fascinating combination of very physical, where it says in the pasuk that the body of man was created from the earth, and God breathes a soul into man. So it's a combination, it's a fascinating combination of physical and spiritual. It's a very interesting thing to think about. Okay, we're going to go on now to chapter 2, verse 3. Chapter 2, verse 3. It's the pasuk from Shabbos. Vayivarach Elokim es yom hashvi v'yikadesho. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Kivo Shavas Mikom Melachto. On the seventh day, God rested from all of his work. Asher bara Elokim la'asos. He rested from all of his work that God created to do. That last word, this is one of these classic psukim that we say all the time, so we're used to it. What in the world does la'asos mean at the end of the pasuk? Look at the pasuk. Hashem blessed the seventh day. He sanctified it because on the seventh day, he rested from all the work that he had done in creating the world. He rested from that which he created. Why say la'asos, to do? It seems very awkward at the end of the verse. Let's start with Rashi. Asher bara Elokim la'asos. I believe it's the second Rashi on pasuk Gimel. Hamlacha shoyseruya le'asos b'Shabbos chafal v'asa b'shishi k'moshe before Bereishit Rabbah. Rashi says la'asos, to do, means that theoretically there was work that should have been done in the creation of the world on the seventh day, but God pushed it all back to the sixth day, so that the seventh day would be a day of rest. So la'asos, he actively did on the sixth day that which would have theoretically been done on the seventh day. That's how Rashi explains the pasuk of la'asos. Two comments about that. First of all, it's so interesting. Of course, this is how we live our lives, right? We're regularly, there's even a famous Talmudic quote about it, that if a person works hard before Shabbos, they'll have what to eat on Shabbos, right? In other words, in addition to being a day that we refrain from certain types of activities, Shabbos is a day that's so much about preparing for Shabbos. This is the famous thing. Hillel would spend the whole week finding special things, setting aside for Shabbos. So in the nature of the creation itself, God did it that way, that there were things that logically would have been done on the seventh day, and God did it all on the sixth day. That's just one thought, but just another comment just to think about in light of all of this is, this is a very powerful perspective, because imagine if it was a 6-day job. So God worked for 6 days and then rested on the seventh. Sure, he rested on the seventh. The job was over, right? In other words, imagine someone asks a gabbai, so how does Yom Tov look for you? So he says, Sukkos, I do this on this day, this, and then the ninth day is Simchas Torah, and then I rest. What do you mean, and then you rest? Yom Tov's over. That's the point. So what does it mean the seventh day is the day of rest? It's finished. The answer is no. That it theoretically would have been that the seventh day would have still been a day of creation, but God specifically made it that was all done on the sixth day, so that the seventh day was about rest. Just an interesting thing to think about. Okay, what I want to go on to now is the Ramban. It's the Ramban under the heading Asher bara Elokim la'asos. I think that's the second Ramban on this pasuk. But I want to begin what for me is the third paragraph, and it's like 10 or 15 lines into the Ramban. I'm not sure we'll understand this exactly, but it's a very interesting Ramban to think about. Beginning with the word vidah. Vidah. So again, it's about 10 or 15 lines into the Ramban Asher bara Elokim la'asos, which is probably your second Ramban on pasuk Gimel. Vidah, you should know. Ki nichlal o b'milas la'asos, ki sheishis yimei Bereishit, hein kol yemos olam. Says the Ramban, there's something totally different that's implied by the word la'asos. In God's creation of the world through the 6 days, he is setting a tone and sort of laying the groundwork for all of world events that will follow. You ever hear people talk about this world is only going to be around for 6,000 years? So the Ramban quotes this idea here. So there's 6 days of creation. Gemara says the world is going to be around for 6,000 years. Shalakach amru yomo shalakadosh baruch hu elef shanim. But there's a medrash that says that a day for God is like 1,000 years. What does that mean anyway? So he says that's referring to this idea that the world will be here for 6,000 years. For the first 2 days, the firmament in the ground hadn't been established yet, right? In other words, it was just all water on the surface. The water hadn't been gathered to allow the land to manifest itself. For the first 2,000 years, there was no one who called out the name of God. In other words, Avram and Noah, Avram were the first ones to talk about God actively, right? So he says, so the first 2,000 years, it's like the land was like covered with water. Now, for the first 1,000 years, there was humanity that recognized God, right? I mean, Adam and Chava clearly recognized God. There was an understanding of God. Just things ultimately went downhill. But light was created on the first day. And in that first 1,000 years was a basic human understanding of God. Now we talk about Enosh, there's a reference in this week's parasha to Enosh doing idol worship. But he says maybe Enosh only did idol worship once Adam died. So the creation of light represents the life of Adam, which was almost 1,000 years. In the second day, there was creation of a firmament to divide the firmament in the heavens, to divide between the upper and lower waters. The idea of a division between the waters is reminiscent of the division between Noach and his family and everybody else, right? That Noach and his family were designated as righteous. And because they were designated as righteous, because they were designated as righteous, they were set apart from everyone else, but everyone else perished in the waters. That's alluded to by the second day. That's the second 1,000 years of world history. B'yom hashlishi, on the third day, Nires hayabasha v'hitzmicha v'yasas aperos. On the third day, the earth manifested itself and it sprouted forth and fruit was developed. Huelaf hashlishi amaskal bios Avram mem ches shana. At the beginning of the third 1,000 years, Avram was 48 years old, and Avram was the first one to really spread belief in God. I got confused before. Avram is the one he's referring to, the one to spread belief in God. He began to call out in the name of God. Okay, I just want to keep on going. Vayom Harvi'i, on the fourth day, Nivru bo hamaoros. The lights were created. The sources of light were created. Hagadol va'katan va'kochavim. The sun, the moon, the stars. Yomo yirmos be'elef hadalit. That alludes to the 4,000 year. Hu heichel kasher nivne bayis rishon. In between the year 4 and 5,000, the first Beis Hamikdash was created. Ayin Beis Shana achrei binyano ad achrei Beis Hasheni kuf ayin Beis Shana. When there was a temple, there was light for all the Jewish people. The glory of God filled his house. That light was like a flame on the altar. But after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, their light was minimized and they were exiled. So that idea of the sun and then the sun setting and there being a smaller moon, the second Beis Hamikdash wasn't as great as the first Beis Hamikdash. So that's all alluded to with the fourth day of creation. In the fifth day, the water brought forth life. And birds. That's after the destruction of the second temple was year 5,000. And that, the idea of that was this 5,000th year was that the nations of the world are just running rampant. And it's like the creatures flourishing all over the earth. So animals are created before the sun comes out. And then humanity is created. And that references that finally the ultimate redemption comes. In other words, the sense is that the full purpose of the world has come out through the creation of humanity, and that represents the ultimate redemption in the world. And then, what do we call the ultimate redemption, the times of Mashiach? Yom Shekulo Shabbos. a day that's like totally Shabbos. It's like a whole different existence. And that, of course, is represented by Shabbos. So this Ramban's a little tricky, but it's very interesting to think about. So we discussed this morning why there has to be this introductory pasuk for the creation of man. And we discussed what it means when talking about Shabbos, Asher bara Elokim la'asos, that God created to do. We discussed Rashi's idea, and we discussed Ramban's idea.